project, but they were selling so much tap beer that they went back and put in the other 3 at their own expense. So they got Gusto to do it.
What's that?
Add 3 more taps to the bar in there.
Oh, they sell beer?
Oh yeah.
Are they?
Yeah. Yeah, they had 3 taps and they've already gone to 6 now. So.
Yeah.
They even had
Never have enough.
Well, that's the
That's the thing.
they've got a pretty big cooler now. What they had to do was they had to go to a backup keg setup because they were loading the kegs too fast, and now they
And that's because you can only put the little tank in.
Which is
They had the half barrels instead of the full barrels.
How big is that? How big is
on
that?
the other side of the Kenai Hills.
What'd you do, skip high school? That's the keg you always had at the keggers for crying out loud. They're the ones like this.
That was back in the.
Yeah, not this side?
No, it's
That's
a
a big one?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, is there one bigger than that? That'd be a real revelation, you know? Maybe there's a bigger keg?
My brother was born in '58 and he also
That's a
was
most part,
before it became a state.
You're not used to
And
having
so,
that.
yeah, it's kind of,
They're just using
and
little
it's usually
tiny
a very
tapes.
busy house. I mean, in such a trance institution.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
As large as it is.
Cost them all, they have to change out.
A lot more waste.
Even now.
We have to clean them and transport them.
Sure. Yeah, no,
And
it's
the
cool.
kegs.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't know what that is, I mean, it could be good, it could be bad, I don't know.
That could be.
John, how are you?
Louisiana.
Oh, my God.
Well, a meeting.
Yeah, looks like we might get a grant.
You got any real word yet?
Yeah, Joe, in fact, Joe this morning was emailing, he thinks next week or 2, where I have some money flowing, he's thinking about $9 million. Yeah, discretionary, and I think it's 70% of your entitlements. Is it entitlement or discretionary?
Both.
Jared Brown's a good guy.
What they're telling us is 70% of the entitlements. So we've got to carve the project up a little bit to get that up to 30% out of there. But yeah, I guess there's still a chance it might go, something like if they decide not to take up the bill again in the house, then it'll be 100%. But if they, I didn't really understand that part.
They didn't leave all together, they just
Oh, yeah.
I'm clearly mixing them
I
up.
think the house is supposed to be next
I
week.
can't say who just mixing them up with them.
Enjoying the spring so far?
I should roll some bluff.
That clock is
Barrel
slow,
fire in here.
so I'll get it changed, but,
It was slow last month.
you know,
Doesn't take
How are you building
It
it?
this
just-
outfit all
do you
year
know,
long
all
to
of
do it.
all of our automatic clocks are
Or all screwed
wrong.
up. The satellite ones, they don't work.
We should see right now. We're trying to move, there isn't 2 clocks the same in the whole peak facility.
We don't have 2 clocks the same either.
Oh, here's the crazy one. Our computer system's off.
I know, you should do.
10 minutes.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, despite what the clock says, it is 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
No,
No,
everybody
we weren't expecting.
Michael.
Well, that's right, Mike said he
Would you
wasn't.
all stand for the pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before I get to the consent agenda, it's always been implied in the past, but I'm going to read it before each board meeting now, just so everybody understands. But I'd like to welcome the public and remind them that this board appreciates participation from the public. And if you have any comments throughout the board meeting or work session, please stand, state your name and address, and your comments will be heard. So we we aren't gonna, you don't have to wait till the very end. If you want to talk about a certain issue before we vote on it, just let us know and raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can speak before we vote. First item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine, whoops. We gotta find out who's here.
I've got it.
You've got it. You got it?
I got it.
All right. Everybody who's not here, don't speak up. Everybody else, keep quiet. Okay. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action. Please do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. The consent agenda consists of the approval of the board meeting minutes from March 29th, approval of Finance Committee meeting minutes from April 20th, payroll checks totaling $72,358.70, maintenance and operations checks listed totaling $392,805.37, the approval of the passenger facility charge totaling $55,000, and the financial reports for March. Would anybody like to remove anything from this agenda? Or have any comments? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? John, what's happening?
Yeah, we got a lot of exciting things. You probably saw in the weekly report, we did our Part 139 inspection in the last month, and for the second year in a row, we actually got a clean inspection, which is pretty rare to get 2 in a row. We had a new inspector this year, which makes it even more rare because typically the inspectors have 1 or 2 focus areas that they really hone in on, and so you get an inspector typically for 3 years, but they've had some staffing changes, so we ended up with a new inspector last year and a new inspector this year. And typically you don't have time to clean up whatever it is you know they're going to be looking at when you have a new inspector, but 2 years in a row we've actually been able to get a clean inspection. So we're pretty excited about that. We'll be putting together a recognition event for the guys on that one. Part 139 process covers everything from paint and markings on the airfield to the signage, to our snow plan, our training records. I mean, it is a very intense and rigorous inspection. There's a night lighting inspection where the inspector comes back in the evening and drives your airfield in the evening. We talked about the wildlife plan. There's a lot of quizzing that goes on throughout to make sure that even Holman's folks and Mike's folks know the safety rules for the fueling and where the fire extinguishers are and which extinguishers are used for what and all those things. So it's a real challenging couple of days, and we're real excited that we got our second clean bill of health in a row. So good job to Rod and the guys. Rod's out at the annual snow symposium in Buffalo. Every year there's a large conference that focuses in on snow removal, and that's where Rod is today, so out in the Niagara Frontier area. But we're real excited about that. We'll be putting together an event, and we'll let you all know if you want to come in and do that, come to the event. We'd love to have you. Typically we either cater in lunch or sometimes we actually have an evening dinner for the guys when we have a clean inspection like that. So you'll be hearing soon. Rod's just now polling the guys to kind of see when they want to get together and what they want to do. We also had a conference call with Allegiant just even this morning. They had their annual conference this year out in Florida. I forget one of the remote cities they go to from the East Coast. And so we elected not to go this year, but I did have a good conference call with our representative, who's actually a Calgary native, and we've cultivated a really good relationship with him over the last couple of years. And so typically we get probably the first-hand scoop more so than about anybody on what's going on in Allegiant. So what we found out is, of the northern tier markets, we're actually holding up one of the best. They said our performance was far better than most of the other northern tier markets, probably due to that aggressive marketing that we've been doing. They said Phoenix in particular was actually a year-over-year improvement for them, which was kind of surprising. Very few year-over-year improvements in their system right now, the Canadian dollar where it is. Vegas, we've got some ideas on how to market that a little better. We do need to work on Vegas a little bit more to try and improve that. In the long term, Orlando's still out there as a future market. I finally, for the first time, heard an explanation of one of the issues there. I had forgotten this, but their crews end up at home every night. That's one of the selling points of becoming an Allegiant pilot, is they don't overnight their crews anywhere. So in order to do that, you need a 9-hour flying day. We are just over the cusp of a 9-hour flying day because they're only allowed to fly for 10 hours now with the new crew rest rules. So they have to be here and back to the station by 10 hours, and we're just over the cusp. So until they renegotiate their pilot agreement, we're a little bit out of range for an Orlando flight, but they do think that'll happen in the next year or two. But some really good feedback there. The first time I'd actually heard them articulate that, so we're kind of waiting for that pilot agreement. But overall, they seem very happy with the performance of Great Falls, and I think looking ahead, LA will be out there in the near future for us as an opportunity again. We're talking about maybe a spring schedule for LA this time instead of summer. I think that actually might be stronger for us. They're just now moving LA back to year-round flights where they have the capability to get a gate or two in LAX. There for a couple of years they didn't have any gate space except for in the summer months, and so now they'll be able to go back to year-round flying there. What we know from the past is the route did not perform real well year-round in Missoula, but I think with our Canadian influence, spring and fall, we actually might perform better than Missoula on that route because we can get those Canadians to fly a different time of year. So something to look forward to in the future. The retreat, you probably saw in the weekly report, it's about the time of year when we talk about retreat and retreat topics. My recommendation this year is we need to hold a master plan final presentation or rough draft presentation, which is the final presentation, and we need to have a public open house for that so that we have the opportunity for public comment on that draft. My recommendation is we do that at the May meeting. That will keep us on schedule to complete the draft master plan and send it out to the FAA before June. We can turn on comments after that and get that back to them. So my recommendation is we would start the board meeting at 11 o'clock in May, and the first 2 hours would be to get that master plan rough draft meeting in. We would probably publish that in the paper as an open house workshop type of thing, so the public knows they're invited to come and comment on the master plan, get a copy of it online, get it out there and post it ahead of time so people could download it or look at it online. But that would be my recommendation if the board, if we want to hold another retreat. The Air Service conferences are late this year anyhow, and that's typically one thing we talk about. The first Air Service conference that I'll be going to is in June, not until the 18th. So it would make sense to me to have a retreat in the fall if we were going to go back and do a retreat again, or we can just schedule the master plan. That would be probably one of the bigger topics for the retreat anyhow, the master plan presentation. So it's the board's discretion as to what you'd like to do. We could start even earlier and add some more to that May meeting if there's other topics that you'd want to hear about. Let's throw that out for
the board's
discussion.
pleasure now.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anybody have an opinion on the annual retreat this year? If you just want to cover the master plan, or would you like to add other topics and stretch out your day a little bit?
I'm good to start at 11. I don't see any reason to put anything but the master plan in there.
Anybody else?
That's what I feel too.
Good check.
Is that the Tuesday before Memorial Day, right after?
It's right after, and that's the other thing I was going to point out is it's right after the holiday. If anyone's,
Is everybody okay with that day?
it's the 31st.
Maybe not.
I'll check with the boss.
It's pretty easy for you to go to that retreat, not knowing whether you're going to be here or not.
I don't think we'll have enough public involvement to move the meeting, but, for some reason, it seems like we're going to have a huge crowd. We might look to move the meeting upstairs at 11 o'clock, or at least maybe have that room ready to go if a bunch of people show up. And our consultants will be here for that meeting.
Okay,
Well, that Tuesday means it's a Monday, right?
It is.
Mondays are horrible,
Is Mr. Buck supposed to be back?
so it's a good day not to be
He's
there.
supposed to be back.
Well said.
oh, yeah, Mike Buck will be back by then.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. The new Monday that week.
Mhm.
Monday last year, we found out that the guard, wasn't that the weekend they found out that the guard, or the FAA couldn't change it?
That seems like so long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, because it was actually on the Thursday before, because we were trying to get a hold of them all day Friday, but they didn't.
Yeah, Fridays are.
They didn't work there.
Yeah. So, everybody okay with that? Not gonna, no day is a good day, but gotta find a day, so, all right. I think you have a consensus.
We'll schedule that. And the last thing I was going to report is we finally have exceeded $1 million in concession sales. It's been a long-term target for us, but we did get there last month. And so we've gone into the new contract structure, and we get another 2% of sales now for the remainder of the year, which is really good news. And if we can get to 1.2 million in sales, we'll actually get a further 2% based on the new contract that we negotiated when we did the terminal expansion. So good news, a couple extra $1,000 in revenue for the remainder of the year. And I think we're a little bit below the food and budget budget item right now, but I think with the additional revenue for the remainder of the year, we might stand a chance of catching up by the end of the year. So good news there.
So it must be scaring people enough that they can't get through security, so they're showing up early, and when they actually get through there faster than they need to, then they're looking for something to drink or eat.
Yeah. Well, and the weather delays typically are what does
weather
it.
delay.
But we haven't had a ton of those this year. Allegiance, if anything, have been a little bit more reliable. Denver's had its issues, but when we have those bad winters in the hub cities, that really helps sales too. But this year isn't the case. I mean, the gift shop is just on fire. I mean, it's doing great. I mean, they've really done a terrific job of selecting a lot of the retail offerings there. The jewelry now, it really goes well. The clothing really sells well. And they've got some higher end items in there now too. $20 handmade mugs and that kind of thing. So the gift shop really has done quite well this year.
Told you I have a charge account with them. I'm one of their best customers.
You are?
And that's all I have.
Yeah.
That's it for the
That's it?
director's report, yep.
Okay. Okay, I guess we're on to where we invest our money. Short term.
Yes, the state, Montana Board of Investments requires that every so often we go back through the registration process to invest in their, what they call their STIP plan, which is a short-term investment portfolio. It's primarily T-bills, I think, isn't Maria? Am I getting that right? Yeah, primarily T-bills of various durations, and they're laddering all the time so that we can get our money in and out with just a couple weeks' notice, really. But it's actually performing a little better than it has been the last few years. And very few things we can actually invest in. We're allowed to use CDs. We do actually have a CD right now that we got a couple years ago at a really good rate. But if you know anything about CD rates right now, they're terrible. And so there's really not many other opportunities for us to put our money out there. We have to be federally insured in anything that we put our funds in. So it does limit the options.
Okay, so this is looking for approval of you need approval of this, don't you?
We do. It's a resolution to.
Resolution.
Yeah. to accept the STIP agreement.
I'll make the motion to approve the STIP agreement as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? I don't really think there's much option here, it's just a change of the status quo, more or less.
If we do see CDs that, that come through that are a good rate, we would probably start to move some of those funds over. We do, we keep about $1.5 million in hard reserves that we don't really do anything with, and that's a great candidate for CDs because we don't plan to tap into it. Actually, it was our investment banker told us about the last CD we got when we were doing the refinancings. And so if we do see something like that, we'll bring that to the board, but otherwise the STIP is probably the best opportunity for us.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I think the 5-year CDs now are a vanishing breed, or else they're way below 1, just for perspective. Most areas.
Okay. All, yes.
Well, I have one question. So I actually read this, and we're designated you, John, as the guy to make decisions. Yet we have Maria as a program manager. So can you explain the difference in those roles?
That's a good point. I mean, Maria's the one that logs into the system and, and actually manages the account. But, if we're transferring monies and those types of things, we want a secondary signature on on there. And obviously with our limited staff, we need to have, some checks and balances for, major transfers and things like that.
Can I add?
Yeah.
John is the authorized representative and I'm a delegate. So meaning I can do transactions, and it's like, before we can do anything, our names are ready. We're the only ones that can accept it, and it's between our account, just between our accounts. There's only two accounts that it can go to and from. It's either a deposit or withdrawal, and it goes from both two accounts. It's either we add money to our investment or withdraw our money and to go to our bank account.
So she would generate the action and I would authorize the action, through, the normal paperwork that she funnels through the office there.
Basically, all the transactions I perform with his approval.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it kind of works the same way at the credit union. I'm the manager of the investment portfolio, but I have 2 people who can do transactions, and that doesn't include me. So, checks and balances.
Okay.
Is that the case, or can you do transactions as well?
I'm the only one that does transactions for them, and he approves it. He's the authorized representative. He can do the same thing, but
You probably have a different check and balance, though, it's probably something
A
physical.
little bit different, but it's not unusual to name someone as the program manager or the investment manager and someone else to do the actual,
Sure.
yeah.
Like as we go through this project, the runway project, we're gonna have to pull money out of STIP. So when she's gonna make a withdrawal out of STIP, then I would authorize that, and say, okay, I see that you're taking $40,000 from STIP to put into Wells Fargo. And then eventually we would, pay out of, First Interstate, I guess, in this case. but-
actually, there's 2 exhibits here, A and B. The A is the representative with him, and the delegate one is the B. And then there's also, if you read through all the clauses, it says what the delegate can do and what the representative can do, and what the chairman or the board can do. Because you have to sign them, and you have to sign them to return it to them.
Okay, are we ready? All those in favor of approving the STIP as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Sounds like you want to build a runway.
Yeah, we, in the last month, the Senate did approve the FAA reauthorization. Should be going to the House here in the next couple of weeks. And FAA, just even before this meeting, was indicating that we might see some funding in the next 2 to 3 weeks, about a $9 million initial offer. There is going to be a Part A and B. Although the FAA funding might be in place, the authorization to spend the funding isn't yet approved. The Congress has not passed a full year budget for the federal government. So even though the money might be funded, they don't have authorization to spend it until that full B part goes through. So it looks like our grant will probably come in two pieces, $9 million and then $400,000 later this summer. We're looking for a piece of the project right now that we can carve off for $400,000. It's likely to be the installation of the electrical components on the runway and taxiway. We're going to buy the components because they're long lead items. Some of them are 5 weeks out, but we are going to just store them on site until we can get the additional $400,000 actually install them with the project. So we'll have the $9 million to get the project started. We can award all the schedules, and then we'll carve back through a task order a piece of work equal to about $400,000 until we get that second slice of money. The other alternative, which is still kind of being floated out there, is Kalispell might loan us some money from their EIP. You remember last year we loaned money, I think it was Havre, wasn't it? You remember who we loaned to?
That was Sydney, wasn't it?
It was Sydney, I think you're right. So, last year we loaned money to Sydney. We've already gotten that back in this project. We might be able to get some money from Kalispell because they don't have plans to spend their full allocation. So that's currently being discussed with Kalispell right now, potentially to fund that $400,000. Either way, we should receive about $9.4 million in federal dollars this year. We plan to spend about $1.8 million in local funds. That includes the ineligible items, keeping the width at 150 feet. Currently, we're planning to fund the additional thickness of pavement. At the May meeting, the engineer will be here as part of the master plan discussion. We're planning to put that before the board to make a final decision on if we want to fund that or not. They're doing some analysis that seems to indicate we may not need to do that additional thickness, but it's in the budget right now. Also in there is the paving the SRE yard and the materials for the Red Horse taxi lane construction too. So this is the majority of our current year program in this one item. Given that the grant offer is going to come between between board meetings and we would like to award the construction contract as quickly as possible because they're going to begin cutting material out of their quarry and getting it down to spec as soon as possible in order to meet this production schedule. So we want to award that as soon as we can get the funds in hand. I'd like to ask the board for authorization in advance to accept a AIP grant in the amount up to $9.4 million. I'd also like to ask the board for authorization to contract with a low bidder, which is Schellinger Construction out of Missoula, out of Columbia Falls, for the AIP portion and a local portion not to exceed $1.8 million.
John, I have a question. I was reading through the request on page 3 and 4. I feel like we might have talked about this before, but what is a DBE?
Disadvantaged Business Enterprise.
Okay.
And you have to be federally designated as that. It could be a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business.
So this sentence is a little troubling to me. Did they make a contentious effort or a conscientious effort? Because I'm thinking that
We
sounds
take it both ways.
We'll have to ask Schellinger which of those they made.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they meant
Welcome to federal
conscientious.
contracting.
Because it doesn't make sense to say contentious.
It does.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever
not
that
what
is,
they
we're
meant.
good with
Yeah.
it, right?
It's pretty contentious that they're dealing
didn't
with
spell it right.
DBEs, but it was conscientious in their efforts to
Oh, got it.
try to find a DB for the project. That doesn't look like they found any.
No. Looks,
Which
no.
isn't that uncommon in
No,
the contracts up here.
Oh, okay.
they're that kind of a dying breed.
That's why it can be contentious sometimes, because there are limits
Yeah.
where they put goals,
Okay.
and sometimes it's very difficult to reach those goals.
Well, and even firms
They
that
didn't
make,
mean contentious.
no,
Okay.
even firms that historically have been DBEs, if they reach a certain revenue target, they're not allowed to be a DBE anymore.
Okay.
So it's, or they time out. There's a couple ways that even in a DBE you may have had, might go away.
Got it. Okay.
So, you don't have any money, and you want to award a contract. So you must have a pretty understanding contractor to have them start construction on a project that you don't have any money for, nor do you have authorization to sign, because you can't sign it without the money.
Right. Yeah, we won't sign it until we get the grant, but assuming we get the grant and the board is okay with awarding the contract, then we would go ahead and award the contract here in 2 to 3 weeks before the next board meeting. But they're really concerned, given the volume on the project, they want to start making that, that gravel as soon as possible. And they're probably going to go ahead and start anyhow, is what they told us. But
It's a pretty tight schedule.
It is a pretty tight schedule.
Even with the board approval of the award of the contract, they're doing that at their own risk.
Yeah.
Building the material, yeah.
It's in good faith.
But Congress hasn't even approved funding for the FAA, right?
Senate has passed the
Yeah.
FAA reauthorization. The House will consider it here in a week or two.
But so we're only 435 guys or gals away from a no vote.
Yeah?
I mean, they could say no.
It was passed in the Senate 95-3, so it's got pretty broad support.
All I want to make sure is that are we approving this contingent upon you receiving the funds?
Yep.
And then you would award the contract?
Yeah,
Yep.
and if for some reason we get $4 million, then we're only going to award $4 million worth of work, plus our local share.
You won't have a project if you only have 4 million.
Yeah, we won't do much.
Half a runway does not work. Okay,
But we have, you're right, there's some things we can carve out pretty easily, the snow building or, some other pieces of the work.
I would move that we accept the resolution as it's written.
it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we give authorization to John to accept the FAA funding when it comes and award the contract before the next meeting. Are there any other questions or comments? All those? Yes?
We want to put, what if they don't give us 9 million? If they give us 7? Are we green lighting at 7? Are we green lighting at 8? Are we green lighting at 8.5 million? Or are we green lighting at 2?
You may remember last year we had the same situation where the bids came in higher than what we had budget funds, and I came to the board and said I'd like to award up to what we have, and we'll negotiate with the contractor to get work out of it. And in the end, we cut the overlay on the value park and a couple of other things to get down to the budget. So it's kind of a similar situation. If we get 7 million, there's probably work there that Schellinger would do and that we would want him to do. We would just figure out what pieces of it would have to wait. Because more than likely, it's a timing issue. AIP is funded through user funds. It's not a general fund expenditure. So
It'll require another board approval if we don't get 9 million.
well, that's what I'm saying is I
What
would
he's saying
negotiate
is
the contract down.
we're giving him the authority to award as much as he can based on the money he gets from the FAA.
Yeah. But this is the highest priority in the Northwest region this year. The FAA has already confirmed that. It'll be the first grant cut.
But, Brad, maybe you know, at what point does the project become unfeasible? I mean, at 4 million, it's unfeasible. Is it feasible at
You have to
7
look at
million?
the individual line items, but I'd have to review it, but the biggest hunk is the usable runway. And you're not going
Just to add my own 2 cents, I think we're authorizing John to use his discretion, should something like that happen, to spend up to the amount that they grant us, or come back to the board if you so choose.
Yeah, we may have to come
say,
back.
look, we have to go with a plan B and come up with something next year. I mean, really, the project, anything under Schellinger's bid, is that the right way to say it?
Schellinger.
Schellinger? Is not it won't go forward. If it's $500,000 under, unless you're a master negotiator.
Well, unless we change our 1.8, and that would require board approval, right?
And,
That should.
Yeah, it would require board approval to go to 1.8, but that is one option that's always available to us, is we could always, even the 400,000, we could go at risk and the FAA would reimburse us once they cut the money back. We're trying to avoid that because, I don't want to spend $400,000 of our own dollars, even though we're not earning anything on it. But I'd rather not do that because we are drawing down the reserves to do this project in general. So I don't want to go any further into reserves, but the other thing we could do is come back to the board and say, okay, the FAA is not going to have the second grant cut until August. We got one grant a few years ago in September. I mean, that's right at the end of the federal year. And I was surprised they even cut the grant at that point. But it can happen, and we could come back in May and say, okay, we're going to proceed with the runway construction, because that's only a mill and overlay. The expensive piece of this project is the taxiway, because it's full-on, bottom-up construction. So you're starting down in the ground excavating. So we could come back to the board in May and say, we didn't get the grant we wanted, we got less. We need to phase the project this way. That is one possible outcome. But getting us another extra week or two on construction if the grant does come through is a big deal to the contractor, and really us too, if we don't want to be constructing in November.
We're leaving it to John's discretion to award what makes sense. Yeah, that's.
But not to commit us personally
Right,
for
from our
more than
funds.
1.8.
Right.
Yeah, no more than 1.8.
Yep.
That sounds good to me.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
This was a really good bid, though. I would point that out. We're well below engineer's estimate, and I think we're getting a pretty good deal on the overall project.
Yeah, he left some money on the table. Good for us. Okay, we have a lift station. We'd like to design and construct.
Yeah, you may recall over the last few months, actually it goes all the way back to the last fall, we had some discussions if the Red Horse project could come about and we could find a way to make that project happen and get those taxi lanes built. We're going to have 20 acres of new hangar development space that will be coming online this fall. And we'd like to proceed with the lift station down in that area to hook up the water and sewer utilities. Over the last couple of years, the city's told us that we can't have water down there in the hangars unless we have a sewer connection. Even though there's a couple of septic systems down there now, the city doesn't hook up to city water unless you have a city sewer. And so this project would enable us to have water and sewer for all of the tenant hangars down there, starting with Front Range and well, it's now Lowenbro owns the Davidson hangar. So those would be the first two that would be right there next to the lift station. But then quite a few of the private hangars, as it turns out, in that row, they stubbed out the sewer lines into a pipe that was buried in the road down there. So there's a few of those guys that might ultimately want to connect to it too. And so I think this is an exciting development. I think it really increases the marketability of those hangars, lots down there. If guys can have a restroom in there and maybe even a place to eventually wash their airplanes with an oil water separator, I think it changes the nature of what we can offer substantially. And so I think it's a good investment. It will take us many years to recoup it. As you see back in the fall, and I'm reiterating it here, anybody that would connect to the line, we would add 5 cents to the rent. In order to recoup that, it's going to take us 15 years or longer, depending on how many new hangars are built, to recoup the initial investment, but I do think it's worthwhile. And so this task order would be task order number 18 in the amount of just under $60,000 to design and work with the city on developing the lift station and then performing construction management on it during this summer's project.
What were the assumptions made to get to 15 years?
We need probably in the neighborhood of 20 hangars to connect onto there in order to pay for the lift station. And I don't know how many of the existing ones would connect. I'd say maybe 4 or 5. So we're going to have to develop 15 hangars, up to maybe 20 if nobody connects, in order to get the lift station paid for. But it's kind of a, this is the business we're in, building infrastructure for aviation. Just like the taxi lane, unfortunately, there's no great way to recoup those costs. We're making about $500 to $800, $900 a piece on those private hangars per year, so they're not a big money maker for us. But it is, kind of what we are in the business of doing.
Okay. So you're looking for approval or authorization to execute a task order to design and oversee.
Yep.
How are we going to pay for it?
The lift station, the board approved last month, I think, a total budget of 200,000. I'm sorry, no, in November, the board approved a total budget of 200,000. We're probably going to have to amend that budget. We'll see when we get through design, because we don't have the site exactly where it's going to go or anything. We haven't done the utilities investigation yet in that area. There's an area close to the Lowenboro hangar that's probably the low spot. Maybe across the road from there might be a little better because there's less utilities in that area. So they're going to have to site it and design it from scratch and work with the city to get it done. But we've got about $200,000 that the board approved in a prior action. So we would draw from that budget. We may have to come back and amend that budget. That was our initial thought. From talking to folks, it sounds like it's closer to 250, with design and construction of it.
We only allocate spending money, though. How are you going to pay for it? It's coming out of the general fund.
Yeah, this is directly out of the general fund. Yeah. Yeah, we could make an argument that it's federally eligible, but given how much of our federal dollar, all of our federal dollars are tied up for a couple of years now, finding a window that we could finance this in with the AIP funds, it's going to take a while. Because we've got 2 years of runway construction, and then after that we've got the SRE building expansion. And then after that, things are a little bit softer in terms of, we could move priorities around and try to pay for it then. But given that we're getting the taxi lane built this year, I think, it's a wise choice to get out there and get the utilities in.
So do you apply for the grant and then put it in ourselves and see if they ever reimburse us in a couple of years, or?
It's kind of the opposite of that. You can reimburse yourself with entitlement money. It will never be a discretionary project. It's just not high enough on the rating system. But we could go back a few years down the road if we have, a couple $100,000 that we're not going to allocate and ask to be reimbursed for it. I think you're allowed to reimburse 3 years back. Is that about right?
I think you can go further than that.
Can you go further than that?
The issue that comes to be, though, is if you can build it
Well,
with your own funds,
not
you
federal
can use
bid.
your own specifications
Yeah.
and keep the FAA out of it.
Well, that's a good
Build it
point.
with the intent to be reimbursed with their funds, you have to follow their format.
Yeah, we'd have to go through a
Facility
federal.
like that is way down on the priority list, so.
Yeah, and then trying to overlay the federal requirements with the city requirements is going to be a cat chasing exercise like you wouldn't believe. And we could potentially do it that way, but now you're talking about a full-on federal bid. I'm not sure I'd ever really recommend, waiting for federal dollars on a project like this.
Yes, sir.
Have we polled our current tenants for hangars and asked how many would commit? Has anybody committed to tie in and the rent increase prior to the project even restarting?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 tenants that were trying to put it together with Lowenboro. I think it was last year, the year before. Rob probably remember better than me, but Lowenboro, and he had 1 or 2. Do you know who the other ones were that were up there? There's 2 or 3 tenants that would like to hook on. I don't know, Mike, would you hook on right away?
Yes, I would.
Yeah, and so we've probably got 3 or 4 that would be, right away hooking onto that line. And then it's a matter of, who else is going to build a new hangar. Surprisingly, we've had 3 hangar starts, at least the paperwork starts in the last year, which for us is a brisk pace. We've got Mike's hangar, and then there's a guy next to him he's going to be pretty far from that sewer line. I don't know if it's practical that we'd ever get that sewer line over there. We're kind of talking about that with Mike and Lauren right now about maybe trying to get a small pump from his hangar to get it over to the sewer line that exists by his hangar, his current hangar. And then there's another new hangar which will be right next to the lift station, so there's potential he might be able to hook on too. But I think, yeah, we'll have 3 or 4 tenants right away that want to connect to it, and then as hangars develop, I think it's likely that most of them will connect to it.
Is there a drain field down there now then?
There is, yeah. It's been there it's 20 years old.
Yeah. Mike has one, and Lowenboro, which was Davidson, has one also.
Seems like spending $250,000 on, for the reason this is what we do, and that's it. with a 15-year payback. I guess I'm struggling with that.
Well, the taxi lane's an additional 170, and there's no payback on that. You know, it is the infrastructure of airport.
But that's for the National Guard, and that's for cross windows, and that's for the height elevation, and that's for drawing other large commercial revenue generating.
The Red Horse taxi lane is just a small airplane taxi lane. Can't handle anything larger than a dual engine, plane.
Well, that shoots out every straight down, doesn't it? You wanna go back? I want to take that back. Can we erase it, Ted? It's gotta feel foolish now.
But, like I said, with almost nothing available, we got 3 projects in the last year. That's pretty good, for us. And there is hangar interest out there. But, fortunately, when they did the runway project 10 years ago, they needed borrow, and so they've leveled this 20 acres out. So we don't have the site development costs of leveling the site out. To get into 20 acres for $500,000 and have developable sites right from the get-go, that's pretty affordable, really. Given that we have to build a new taxi lane and get a lift station in. The water's already there. We were able to bury that in the SRE project. So we got the water down to that corner with the SRE project, but there's just no way to get the lift station in. Without, there's not a need for it for any of our other buildings.
Kind of a basic service, whether we get a payback or not on the thing. We wanted a payback really bad. We put coin-operated things on the stalls in here.
$5,000 a flush.
Some of our money back there, yeah.
See how badly they really need our restaurants.
So where you have to put up the money and you have to put up the resources for it to be available for somebody else to come in behind it and utilize the property, whether you're a private developer or anybody else, like Agri-Tech Park or something like that. You have to build it before they can occupy it.
Yeah, you can't really market, it's better marketing it with the services in than to not have it.
Well, a great example is, Mike got into design, and now the city's making him sprinkle his hangar. Going forward with the Universal Building Code, a lot of these hangars are going to have water. It's a matter of time, frankly, before some of the bigger hangars are going to be required to have bathrooms too, depending on if you have a guy working there all the time. And I think it's just kind of the price of building these days to get some of this infrastructure in down there. Fortunately, we're not paying the labor on that Red Horse taxi lane because we're able to build that for, I think, $250 is the bid price. And that could easily be a $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 project, depending on if we were doing it by itself in a bad oil year with no other paving. That could be a very expensive piece of infrastructure. So we're, it's costing us $500,000, or a little less than that to get this site open. But it is 20 acres, which should last us for a solid 20 years of development, I would think.
It makes the property usable and saleable. Is there any other questions or comments?
So when we finish this and 1.8 and all that, where will we be reserve-wise?
That's what I've been presenting the last couple of months. This is in that worksheet I presented the last 2 months. So we're going to be right down at 1.8, 1.7, right in there. We're right at the reserve limit. What we've done with the runway project is we've borrowed ahead on our passenger facility charges. The application Maria filed last year allows us to take our PFC revenue for the next probably 5, 6, 7 years and just put that in the general fund because we're paying ahead on the local share of the runway project, about $1 million worth of it. So we generate $200,000 to $300,000 per year of free PFC flow after we pay for the terminal building expansion that was done in 2010. Which is still on that application. So it's going to take us 5, 6, 7 years to recoup that full PFC amount. And then the airlines are also paying back a portion of the runway project. So there's a couple of amortizations that are coming in with no offsetting expense to help pay for some of this infrastructure. Meanwhile, we're spending a lot of our reserves going out.
Right at the bank's limit or our own?
Our own self-imposed limit.
Does the bank have on those notes, I remember something about that, they have a...
I can't remember do you remember what the reserve requirement is on
No,
that?
we actually talked about that and there's no reserve requirement.
Yeah, I don't think there is one, yeah. Yeah, we decided, the board decided a couple of years ago, kind of informally, when we took on the terminal project, you know,
I was
that
talking about it, but I couldn't remember what we.
about half of operating expenses is what we decided, about 6-month reserve. You know, so we're at, you know, about 1.8 right now with our budget.
Okay,
But now, wasn't there an issue with the city and the oversight of the lift stations up here? So then, once this would be built, it'd be turned over to the city?
The operations turn over to the city, and that's the way most lift stations are built. You know, the developer has to pay, and then once it's built to their specifications, and then they operate the lift station. So, yeah, that is part of the difficulty in doing this, is you really don't know in the design process what you're going to get into with the city requirements. And, you know, we've talked about a few basic ones, you know, backup power and how they plan to do that. You know, some cities require full on-site backup. They only require a hook-in for generators, a portable generator they can bring up. So we've got some of those answers already, but that's what's going to take some time in the design process.
okay. All those, well, we've already set aside the money to build it. Now we're approving the money to design it. All those in favor?
Design and build it. I don't think
No,
we've got a
excuse me, we
motion.
need a
We
motion?
have a motion, yeah.
Okay, excuse me. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion as stated to execute task order 18 in the amount of $59,876 for design and oversight of the lift station.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
I have a question. So we're paying, we're, task order is for the design, and then we're also budgeting for the overseeing of the, or project management as well at the same time?
Yeah, so we have, this year with the size of the project we are going to have 2 engineers representatives on site. They have the capacity to manage this project for us, so there's no added cost to the construction management. We've talked to the engineer about it. It's one of the reasons we want to do it this year, is we don't, you know, they will be on site to handle the construction of it if we can get it done during the runway project.
Good for construction as well, although you've noted that it could increase somewhat.
Once we get the design through, then we'll have a better idea of the size of the pump and all that type of thing. We've got to calculate the flows that you know, for that 20 acres and all that. And so as we get through the design process, we'll have a better idea what size the pipe is, what size pump it is, and if we have to amend the budget, we'll come back to the board and ask for more money. The board approved $200,000 in November. As it says here, I think we're probably closer to $250,000, but we'll know more once we get through the design process. So we'll draw the $60,000 out of the design process out of the $200,000 that's already approved, and then we may have to come back at some point and ask for a little more money.
Okay.
The engineer thinks we might make it, but you know, in talking to a couple of infrastructure builders, they think we're a little light.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, no further items at this time, so any airport authority board member comments? Commissioner Rooney?
No comment.
Commissioner Holden?
No.
Commissioner Goodson?
No.
You've been waiting up, you've been storing up all those comments?
I got them, I'm keeping them there.
You're gonna keep them to yourself, okay. Commissioner Evans?
Not me, you can just count on me
I
for
don't
one.
have any at this time either. Any comments?
I have one.
Oh, you do? Oh,
I
God, I
do.
should have known.
You should have known.
My
Well, I just
mistake.
think it's important to pass on good comments when you hear them. And last week, our credit union and ad club had a national speaker in town, and she goes everywhere. I mean, she has been everywhere. The first thing she complimented us on was our airport in general. And then I found this hard to believe myself, but she said it's easier to fly and make connections from DC in Great Falls than it is in Billings.
Really?
That's what she said. She was in Billings recently as well.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So I just think that's important to share that once in a while.
Yep. I was just looking along those same lines, if I can find it. I had a little text someone that passed on to me from my niece, and they had a little picture of her, and she was sitting by the fireplace. And I can't believe that I'm waiting for an airline in this kind of setting. And then she said, and then someone from the airlines walked up to me and asked me if there's anything I could do for them. She was totally amazed that anybody would come up to her and ask her if she could be helped as she was waiting. So that's it's a very good first impression. There's no doubt about it.
You know, and just along those same lines, I've been helping on a chamber group that's trying to put together a relocation packet, for one relocation packet for the city that people could send out, like many cities have them. And, you know, I was there yesterday, and somebody from Benefis said they get a lot of good compliments, people they're trying to recruit, which I guess is a lot all the time,
Oh, yeah.
about the airport. And I was happy to hear that. I was glad to hear that, you know, she said that, you know, they hear a lot of good things from them. So that's encouraging. I mean, I think the investment we made over there has really paid off for the community.
No doubt about it. Any comments from the public at this time? Okay, with no further business to come before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned, and we've got till 2 o'clock by that clock, and then we'll start our work session agenda.
Peter, he didn't even call today.
He's busy. I just got a text from him.
Must be something exciting happening.
Does it ever get over in April now, or does everybody file an extension?
Well, yeah, never over, but it's,
Everybody I talk to. I file an extension, I file an extension. I've always taken it as my pride I haven't had to file an extension. So.
it just leads to the smaller and smaller crew. We used to.
So I talked